Money changes people, but what happens when the money disappears? Richard Delaney had given his 3 children everything they ever wanted: cars, houses, designer clothes, endless credit cards. At 67, he was one of the richest men in Los Angeles, and his kids lived like royalty. But something was wrong. His children only called when they needed money. They only visited when they wanted something. And Richard was starting to wonder who his kids really were underneath all that privilege. So he decided to find out. Tonight, 3 spoiled adults were about to face the shock of their lives. They thought their father was broke. They thought he needed their help. They had no idea they were walking into a test that would change everything. The man who had never said no was about to teach them the hardest lesson they'd ever learned. Because sometimes the only way to discover someone's true character is to take away everything they think they need. What Richard was about to discover about his own children would break his heart. But what he decided to do about it would change their lives forever. Richard Delaney stood on the balcony of his Beverly Hills mansion, looking out over the city he had helped build. At 67, he owned more real estate in Los Angeles than any single person had a right to. Shopping centers, office buildings, luxury hotels. His empire stretched from downtown to the coast, worth over $3 billion. But tonight, he felt empty. His phone had rung 3 times today. 3 calls from his 3 children, each one asking for money. Marcus, his 35-year-old eldest son, needed $2 million for a sure thing investment in cryptocurrency. It was the 4th sure thing this year, and like the others, it would probably disappear into Marcus's lifestyle of expensive cars and Vegas trips. Catherine, 32, and his only daughter, wanted $500,000 to renovate her Malibu beach house. Never mind that he'd bought her the house 2 years ago, or that she'd already renovated it twice since then. And Tyler, his youngest at 28, needed his monthly allowance increased to $50,000 because inflation was killing him. Tyler had never worked a day in his life, unless you counted posting photos on Instagram as a job. Richard walked back inside his empty mansion. The house had 23 rooms, but it felt like a tomb. His wife Sarah had died 5 years ago from cancer, and since then, the only time he heard laughter in these halls was when his children visited, which was always because they wanted something. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat in his study, surrounded by photos of his family's happier times. There was Marcus at his Harvard graduation, paid for with Richard's money. Catherine at her wedding to a Wall Street banker, the ceremony costing more than most people's houses. Tyler on a yacht in Monaco, living off his trust fund. When had it all gone wrong? Richard remembered when his children were young, before Sarah got sick. They used to have family dinners, game nights, vacations where everyone actually wanted to be together. But somewhere along the way, those moments had been replaced by wire transfers and credit card payments. The truth was, Richard wasn't sure his children actually loved him anymore. They loved what he could give them, but did they love him? There was only one way to find out. Richard picked up his phone and called his lawyer, James Morrison, who had been handling the Delaney family's legal affairs for 20 years. "James, I need you to help me with something unusual," Richard said. "Of course, Richard. What do you need?" "I want to fake my own financial ruin." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry, what?" "I want my children to think I've lost everything. I want to see how they react when they believe I have nothing left to give them." "Richard, are you feeling all right? Maybe we should talk about this in person." "I'm fine, James. I'm tired of not knowing who my children really are. I need to test them." Another pause. "This could be complicated and potentially dangerous if word gets out to the media or your business partners. Can you do it or not?" James sighed. "I suppose we could create false financial statements showing massive losses, make it look like bad investments wiped you out. But this would have to stay between us and maybe 2 other people at most." "Do it. And James, make it look convincing. I want them to believe I'm practically broke." Over the next 2 weeks, James worked with Richard's most trusted accountant to create a paper trail of financial disaster. Fake documents showed Richard's real estate empire crumbling due to market crashes and bad loans. His stock portfolio appeared to have been wiped out by poor investment choices. His liquid assets seemed to have evaporated through a series of failed business ventures. On paper, Richard Delaney had gone from billionaire to barely millionaire in 6 months. The truth was very different. Richard had actually moved most of his wealth into offshore accounts and shell companies months earlier, part of a tax planning strategy James had suggested. His real net worth had grown to over $4 billion in the past year, thanks to some brilliant real estate deals and a booming stock market. But his children didn't need to know that. Richard called each of them personally to arrange a family dinner, not at one of their usual expensive restaurants, but at a modest steakhouse in Burbank that he'd rented out for the evening. "Dad, why are we meeting at this place?" Catherine asked when she arrived, looking around the simple restaurant with obvious distaste. She was wearing a dress that cost more than the average person's monthly salary and carrying a purse that could have fed a family for a year. "I'll explain when everyone gets here," Richard said. Marcus arrived 15 minutes late, as usual, in his new Ferrari. He'd been driving expensive cars since he was 16, each one paid for by Richard. At 35, Marcus had the soft look of someone who'd never done physical work or missed a meal. His suit was custom-tailored, his watch was worth more than most people's cars, and his attitude suggested the world owed him everything. Tyler showed up 20 minutes after that, apologizing with the careless ease of someone who'd never faced real consequences for anything. At 28, he looked like an overgrown college student, which wasn't far from the truth since he'd spent the past 10 years bouncing between graduate programs, changing his major whenever classes got too difficult. "Okay, Dad, we're all here," Marcus said, checking his phone impatiently. "What's this about? I have a poker game in Malibu at 9. Richard looked at his 3 children sitting around the table. They were strangers to him now, he realized. Beautiful, educated, expensive strangers who happened to share his DNA. "I asked you here because I have some bad news to share," Richard began, "about our family's financial situation." Catherine looked up from her phone. "What kind of bad news?" "I've lost most of our money." The words hung in the air like smoke. Tyler laughed first, thinking it was a joke. "Come on, Dad. You're Richard Delaney. You own half of Los Angeles." "Not anymore," Richard said quietly. "The real estate market has been worse than anyone reported. My portfolio collapsed 6 months ago. I've been trying to save what I could, but..." He spread the fake financial documents across the table. "These are the numbers." Marcus grabbed the papers first, his eyes scanning the figures. His face went white as he read. "This says you have less than $5 million in liquid assets," he said. "That's correct." "But Dad," Catherine said, her voice rising, "what about my house, my credit cards, my allowance?" "Gone. All of it. I can't afford to maintain your lifestyles anymore." Tyler finally stopped laughing. "Wait, you're serious? You're actually broke?" "Not broke, but close to it. I'll have enough to live simply for the rest of my life, but the days of unlimited spending are over." Richard watched his children's faces carefully. He was looking for shock, yes, but also for concern about his well-being, for questions about his health or his stress levels, for offers to help or support him through this difficult time. Instead, he saw something much worse. Marcus's face had turned red with anger. "How long have you known about this?" 6 months. 6 months? Marcus stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "You've known for 6 months that my inheritance was disappearing, and you didn't tell me? I was hoping to turn things around." "That wasn't your decision to make," Marcus shouted. "That money was supposed to be mine. I've been making plans based on that inheritance." Catherine was crying, but not from sadness, from fury. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is going to be? I just told all my friends that we were buying a house in the Hamptons. How am I supposed to explain this?" "You could explain that sometimes investments don't work out," Richard said carefully. "That even successful people face setbacks." "Setbacks?" Tyler laughed bitterly. "Dad, you just ruined our lives. Do you understand that? I don't have any job skills. I don't have any savings. I was counting on the family money." "Maybe this is a good time to develop some job skills," Richard suggested. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Job skills?" Marcus repeated. "Dad, I'm 35 years old. I can't start over from nothing. People do it every day." "Poor people do it every day," Catherine corrected. "We're not poor people, or at least, we weren't supposed to be." Richard felt something break inside his chest. Not one of his children had asked if he was okay. Not one had offered to help him through what they believed was a devastating financial crisis. They were only concerned about how his problems affected them. "I understand you're upset," Richard said, "but this is temporary. I'm working on new deals, new investments. In a few years, things might turn around." "A few years?" Marcus laughed. "Dad, I don't have a few years. I have debts. I have obligations. I need money now." "What money?" "I just told you, there isn't any extra money." Marcus leaned across the table, his face inches from his father's. "There better be money, Dad. Because I've been living a certain way for 35 years, and that's not going to change just because you made some bad investments. Marcus, please calm down. Calm down? You want me to calm down? Marcus grabbed the financial documents and waved them in the air. These numbers say my trust fund is gone. My inheritance is gone. Everything I was counting on for my future is gone. And you want me to calm down? Catherine wiped her eyes, smearing her expensive makeup. This is all your fault, Dad. You were supposed to be good with money. You were supposed to be smart about investments. How could you let this happen? Sometimes even smart people make mistakes, Richard said. Your mistakes cost us everything, Tyler yelled. Our whole lives. You told us we'd never have to worry about money. You told us we'd always be taken care of. You lied to us. I didn't lie. I believed those things were true at the time. Well, believing isn't good enough. Catherine stood up, her chair falling backward. What am I supposed to do now? How am I supposed to maintain my lifestyle? My friends will find out, and then what? I'll be a laughingstock. Richard looked at his daughter, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. She wasn't concerned about losing financial security. She was concerned about losing social status. The money wasn't important to her because it provided safety or comfort. It was important because it made her feel superior to other people. Catherine, maybe this is an opportunity to make friends who care about you for who you are, not what you have. That's easy for you to say, she screamed. You had 70 years to build a life. I'm 32. I was supposed to have decades of wealth ahead of me. Marcus was pacing now, his hands clenched into fists. I need to know exactly how much money is left. I need to see every account, every investment, every asset, because I'm not going down with your ship, Dad. What do you mean? I mean I'm going to get whatever I can out of this mess before you lose the rest of it. I have a right to my share of what's left. Richard stared at his eldest son. Your share? Yes, my share. I'm your son. That money belongs to me as much as it belongs to you. Actually, it doesn't. It belongs to me until I die. Marcus's face turned purple. Don't you dare try to cut me out now. Not after you already destroyed my future. I'm not cutting you out. I'm just pointing out that the money is mine to manage. Well, you've done a real great job managing it so far, Tyler shouted. Richard looked around the table at his 3 children. Marcus was red-faced with rage, demanding access to accounts that didn't belong to him. Catherine was crying about her social status, worried about what her friends would think. Tyler was panicking about having to actually work for a living. Not one of them had asked how he was feeling. Not one had offered emotional support during what they believed was the worst crisis of his life. They were acting like victims of his misfortune rather than his children who should want to help him through it. I think this dinner is over, Richard said quietly. No, it's not over. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. We need to figure out what happens next. We need to make plans. You need to make plans, Richard corrected. I need to figure out how to rebuild my life at 67 years old. What about our lives? Catherine demanded. What about them? How are we supposed to live? How are we supposed to pay our bills? Richard looked at his daughter, this 32-year-old woman who had never held a real job or paid her own rent or worried about money for a single day of her life. I suppose you'll have to figure that out, he said. Figure it out? Tyler repeated. Dad, I don't know how to figure it out. I've never had to. Then maybe it's time you learned. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard could see the exact moment when his children realized he wasn't going to save them. When they understood that their financial safety net had disappeared, Marcus was the first to leave, storming out without saying goodbye. Catherine followed, sobbing about how her life was ruined. Tyler lingered for a moment, looking lost and confused, before walking out shaking his head. Richard sat alone in the empty restaurant, surrounded by the fake financial documents that told a story of ruin and loss. But for the first time in years, he felt something unexpected, relief, because now he knew the truth about his children. When they thought he had everything, they loved what he could give them. When they thought he had nothing, they wanted nothing to do with him. The test was over, and all 3 of his children had failed it spectacularly. But this was just the beginning, because Richard Delaney hadn't built a $4 billion empire by giving up when things got difficult, and he wasn't about to give up on his children either, even if it meant breaking their hearts to save their souls. 3 days after the dinner, Richard's phone hadn't rung once. Not a single call from any of his children to check on him, to offer support, or even to yell at him some more. The silence was deafening, but his email inbox told a different story. Marcus had sent a formal legal letter demanding immediate access to his trust fund, claiming Richard had no right to hold hostage money that was rightfully his. The letter threatened legal action if Richard didn't transfer the remaining assets within 30 days. Catherine had sent a 3-page email listing every monthly expense she couldn't afford to cut, from her personal trainer to her weekly spa treatments, demanding that Richard find a way to maintain her lifestyle because this isn't my fault. Tyler had sent the shortest message: "Dad, I'm scared. I don't know how to live without money. Please fix this." Richard sat in his study, reading these messages for the 3rd time. His children's true characters were becoming clearer with each passing day. Marcus was entitled and aggressive. Catherine was selfish and demanding. Tyler was helpless and dependent. But none of them had asked how he was doing. His phone finally rang on Thursday morning. The caller ID showed Marcus's number. "Hello, son. Dad, we need to talk." Marcus's voice was cold and formal. "I've been thinking about our situation, and I have some solutions. I'm listening. First, you need to liquidate everything you have left. The mansion, the cars, the art collection. Turn it all into cash." "Marcus, I'm not done." "Second, you need to divide that cash between the 3 of us equally. That way we can each start over with something, instead of watching you burn through what's left." Richard felt his jaw clench. "You want me to sell my home and give you the money? It's not really your money anymore, is it? I mean, you lost our inheritance through bad investments. The least you can do is give us what's left before you lose that too. And where would I live? You could rent a small apartment somewhere, maybe get a part-time job to pay the bills. Lots of older people do it." Richard was speechless. His own son was suggesting that he, at 67 years old, should make himself homeless to fund their lifestyles. "Marcus, I'm not selling my house." "Why not? You can't afford to maintain it anyway. The property taxes alone are probably eating up your remaining income. I can manage my finances without your help." "Really? Because it doesn't look like you've been managing them very well lately." The cruelty in Marcus's voice was stunning. This was the same boy Richard had taught to ride a bike, had taken to baseball games, had supported through college and graduate school, and every failed business venture afterward. "I'm not liquidating my assets to fund your lifestyle," Richard said firmly. "Fine. Then I'm cutting contact until you come to your senses. And Dad, don't expect me to visit or call until you figure out how to fix this mess you created." The line went dead. An hour later, Catherine called. "Daddy, I've been thinking about our conversation," she said in the sweet voice she used when she wanted something. "I know you're going through a hard time, and I want to help." "How do you want to help?" "Well, I talked to Brad about our situation. Brad was her husband, a Wall Street investment banker who made decent money but nothing close to the Delaney fortune. He thinks there might be some opportunities for you to recover some of your losses." "What kind of opportunities?" "Investment opportunities. Brad has some connections with private equity firms that specialize in helping people in your situation. They could help you rebuild your portfolio." Richard knew this was a trap, but he was curious to see where it led. What would that involve? "Well, you'd need to put up whatever capital you have left as collateral. It's risky, but the potential returns are huge. Brad says you could get back to your old net worth within 5 years. And if the investments don't work out, then, well, then you'd lose everything. But Daddy, you're almost lost everything anyway. What's the difference between being broke and being more broke?" Richard couldn't believe what he was hearing. His daughter was suggesting that he gamble his remaining assets on high-risk investments managed by her husband's friends. "Catherine, that sounds like a way for Brad's friends to make money off my desperation." "That's not. Daddy, I'm trying to help you." "Are you, or are you trying to help yourself?" "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that if I lose everything, you and Brad lose your safety net. But if I somehow get rich again, you get your lifestyle back." "I can't believe you'd think that about me." Catherine's voice was rising. "I'm your daughter. I love you." "Do you? Because 3 days ago, when I told you I was facing financial ruin, you didn't ask if I was okay. You asked what it meant for your credit cards. That's not fair, isn't it?" Catherine was crying now, but Richard suspected they were tears of frustration rather than sadness. "Fine. If you don't want my help, then don't ask for it later. And don't expect me to visit you in whatever crappy apartment you end up in." She hung up. Tyler called that evening. "Dad, I'm sorry about Marcus and Catherine," he said. "They're being awful to you." For a moment, Richard felt hope. Maybe his youngest son was different. Maybe Tyler actually cared about him as a person. "Thank you, Tyler. That means a lot to me. Yeah, well, family should stick together, right? Especially during hard times. I agree. So I was thinking, maybe we could help each other out. There it was. Richard waited. I mean, you're going to need someone to take care of you as you get older, right? And I'm going to need somewhere to live now that my trust fund is gone. What are you suggesting? I move back into the mansion with you. I'll help you around the house, keep you company, make sure you're eating right. And in exchange, you let me live there rent-free and give me a small allowance for personal expenses. Richard felt his heart sink. Even Tyler's apparent kindness came with a price tag. How small an allowance? I don't know, maybe $10,000 a month? Just for basics, you know. Food, gas, clothes. $10,000 a month for basics. Richard's youngest son had no concept of how normal people lived. Tyler, $10,000 a month isn't a small allowance. That's more than most people make in salary. Come on, Dad. I can't live on minimum wage. I wasn't raised that way. Maybe it's time you learned how. Learned how to be poor. Why would I want to learn that? Because if you can't support yourself, you're not really an adult. You're just a very expensive child. Tyler was quiet for a moment. So you're saying no, you won't help me. I'm saying you need to help yourself. With what? I don't have any job skills. I don't have any experience. You never made me get a job because you said I didn't need one. You're 28 years old, Tyler. It's not too late to start. Start what? Flipping burgers? Stocking shelves? Dad, I have a master's degree from Stanford. Then use it. Use it how? My degree is in art history. There aren't exactly a lot of high-paying jobs for art history majors. Richard felt a familiar frustration. Tyler had chosen art history precisely because it was impractical, because he knew he'd never have to make a living with it. It was the ultimate luxury degree, affordable only to someone who expected to inherit billions. Maybe you should have thought about that before you picked your major. I picked my major because I was interested in it, because you told me to follow my passion. You said money would never be a problem. And now money is a problem, so you'll have to adapt. Adapt to what? Being poor? Being nobody? Dad, I was supposed to be somebody important. I was supposed to matter. You were supposed to matter because of my money. Tyler paused, realizing what he'd just admitted. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? Dad, please. I'm scared. I don't know how to live like regular people. For a moment, Richard's heart softened. Tyler sounded genuinely frightened, like a child lost in a crowd. But then he remembered the small allowance request and the assumption that he'd be supported without working. Tyler, you're going to have to figure it out, just like millions of other people do every day. But I'm not other people, I'm your son. Yes, you are. And that used to mean something different than it means now. Tyler hung up without saying goodbye. Richard sat alone in his study, surrounded by the silence that had become his constant companion. In 3 phone calls, his children had revealed everything he needed to know about their characters. Marcus saw him as an incompetent money manager who owed him a fortune. Catherine saw him as a resource to be exploited and discarded when no longer useful. Tyler saw him as a permanent safety net who should support him forever without expecting anything in return. None of them saw him as a person deserving of love, respect, or concern. Richard walked through his empty mansion, his footsteps echoing in the marble hallways. 23 rooms, and he was alone in all of them. His children would rather cut contact than offer emotional support during what they believed was his time of greatest need. But Richard Delaney hadn't built his fortune by accepting defeat, and he wasn't about to let his children destroy themselves with their own selfishness and entitlement. He picked up his phone and called James Morrison. James, I need you to make some changes to my will. What kind of changes? Remove my children as beneficiaries. All 3 of them. Richard, are you sure about this? That's a very drastic step. I'm sure, but I want to give them a chance to earn their way back in. How? Richard smiled for the first time in days. I'm going to make them an offer they'll probably refuse, but if they accept it, they might actually become people I can be proud of. What kind of offer? The kind that will teach them the value of work, humility, and real human connection. The kind that will show them what life is like for people who don't have trust funds and unlimited credit cards. And if they refuse, then they'll have made their choice. They'll have chosen their pride over their father, their comfort over their character. Richard hung up and began planning the second phase of his test. The first phase had shown him who his children really were. The second phase would give them a chance to become who they should be. But first, they would have to fall much further than they had already fallen. Because sometimes, People can't climb up until they've hit the very bottom. And Richard's children hadn't hit bottom yet. They still had their credit cards, their cars, their comfortable homes. They still had the illusion that their father would eventually bail them out. That was about to change. Because the next morning, Richard was going to teach them what it really meant to have nothing. And then he would offer them the chance to earn everything back, if they were brave enough to take it. 1 month after the dinner that changed everything, Richard sat in the modest conference room of a Hampton Inn in downtown Los Angeles. He'd chosen this location carefully, neutral ground, away from his mansion, away from the expensive restaurants where his children expected to meet him. At exactly 2 p.m., Marcus walked in first, looking around the cheap hotel conference room with obvious disgust. His designer suit was wrinkled, and his usually perfect hair was messy. The stress of the past month had clearly taken a toll. Catherine arrived 10 minutes later, and Richard barely recognized her. She'd lost weight, her skin looked pale, and she was wearing a dress he'd seen her wear before, something that never would have happened in her old life of endless shopping. Tyler came in last, 20 minutes late as usual, but for the first time in his adult life, he looked genuinely worried. His casual clothes were clean but clearly not new, and he kept checking his phone nervously. "Dad, what are we doing here?" Marcus asked, taking a seat at the small conference table. "If you want to talk about liquidating assets, we could have met at your lawyer's office." "Yeah? And why this place?" Catherine added, looking around the sterile room with its cheap furniture and fluorescent lighting. "It's depressing." Richard stood at the head of the table, looking at his 3 children. They looked like strangers to him now, but for the first time in years, they also looked real. Gone were the confident smiles and entitled attitudes. These were 3 people facing actual problems for the first time in their lives. "I asked you here because I have something important to tell you," Richard began. "Something that's going to change everything. If you found a way to get the money back, I call dibs on first choice of how to invest it," Marcus said quickly. "This isn't about getting money back," Richard said quietly. "This is about the truth." "What truth?" Tyler asked. Richard took a deep breath. The bankruptcy was fake. The room went completely silent. Catherine's mouth fell open. Marcus blinked several times as if he hadn't heard correctly. Tyler just stared. "What do you mean, fake?" Marcus finally asked. "I mean I never lost any money. My real estate empire is fine. My investments are actually doing better than ever. The financial documents I showed you were created by my lawyer to make it look like I was broke." Catherine's face went from pale to bright red. "You're lying." "I'm not lying. I'm worth more money today than I was a month ago. About $4 billion, actually." Tyler laughed, but it sounded more like hysteria than humor. "This is a joke, right? You're messing with us." "I'm completely serious." Richard pulled out a folder and spread real financial documents across the table. "These are my actual bank statements, my actual investment portfolios, my actual net worth." Marcus grabbed the papers, his hands shaking as he read. Page after page of accounts showing millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. "This is impossible," he whispered. "These numbers. Dad, if this is real, you're one of the richest men in California." "I am." Catherine stood up so fast her chair fell over. "You son of a bitch. You put us through hell for a month because of some sick test." "Yes. How could you do this to us?" Tyler demanded. "Do you have any idea what we've been going through? The stress, the fear, the humiliation." Richard looked at his youngest son. "What humiliation, Tyler?" I had to ask friends for money. I had to actually think about getting a job. I've been terrified about my future." "Good," Richard said simply. The word hit the room like a bomb. "Good?" Catherine screamed. "You think it's good that we've been suffering? I think it's good that you've been forced to think about your futures for the first time in your lives. I think it's good that you've had to consider the possibility of working for a living." Marcus was still staring at the financial documents. "Dad, why would you do this to us?" "Because I needed to know who you really were when you thought I had nothing left to give you." "And what did you discover?" Catherine asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Richard met her eyes. "I discovered that none of you love me." The silence that followed was deafening. "That's not true," Tyler said weakly. "Isn't it? In the past month, not one of you called to ask how I was doing. Not one of you offered emotional support during what you thought was the worst crisis of my life. Marcus threatened to sue me. Catherine tried to get me to gamble my remaining money on her husband's investment schemes, and Tyler wanted me to support him for the rest of my life without him contributing anything. We were in shock," Marcus protested. "We didn't know how to react." "You knew exactly how to react. You reacted with anger that I couldn't give you money anymore. You reacted with panic about your own lifestyles. You reacted like people who had lost their meal ticket, not like children who were worried about their father. Catherine was crying now, but Richard could see it was tears of rage, not remorse. So what now? You just wanted to humiliate us? Mission accomplished. Congratulations. No, Richard said. I wanted to understand what kind of people you've become, and now I do. And what kind of people are we? Marcus asked. You're people who have never had to work for anything. People who think the world owes you something because of who your father is. People who measure your worth by the size of your bank accounts and the brands on your clothes. You made us this way, Tyler shouted. You gave us everything. You told us money would never be a problem. You're right. I did make you this way, and that's my fault. But you're adults now, and what you do going forward is your choice. Richard walked to the window and looked out at the busy downtown street below. People hurrying to jobs, carrying lunch in paper bags, taking public transportation, living normal lives with normal problems. I've made a decision about my will, he said without turning around. What kind of decision? Marcus asked nervously. You're no longer in it. None of you. The room erupted. You can't do that, Catherine screamed. Actually, I can. It's my money. Dad, please, Tyler begged. Don't do this. We can change. We can be better. Richard turned back to face them. Can you? Yes, of course we can. Prove it. Marcus leaned forward. What do you mean, prove it? I'm going to give you a chance to earn your way back into my will, all three of you. What kind of chance? Catherine asked suspiciously. You each have to work at a regular job for 5 years, not management positions, not jobs where you can use the Delaney name or connections, real jobs where you punch a time clock and earn minimum wage or close to it. The silence was so complete that Richard could hear the air conditioning humming. Minimum wage? Marcus repeated. Or close to it. Retail jobs, restaurant work, manual labor. The kind of jobs that millions of Americans do every day to support their families. For 5 years? Catherine asked. 5 years. No quitting, no getting fired, no using your education or family connections to get promoted quickly. You have to learn what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. Tyler looked sick. Dad, I can't do that. I don't know how to do those kinds of jobs. Then you'll learn, the same way everyone else learns. And if we do this, Marcus said slowly, if we work these jobs for 5 years, we get back into the will? If you do this, and if you learn what I hope you'll learn from the experience, then yes. What are you hoping we'll learn? Richard sat back down at the table. I'm hoping you'll learn empathy. I'm hoping you'll understand what life is like for people who don't have safety nets. I'm hoping you'll develop work ethic and humility and the ability to find value in yourselves that isn't based on money. And what about our current lives? Catherine asked. Our homes, our cars, our credit cards? Gone. As of tomorrow, all financial support stops. You'll have to figure out how to pay for your own rent, your own food, your own transportation. Marcus looked panicked. Dad, I have a mortgage on a $3 million house. I can't pay that on minimum wage. Then you'll have to sell the house and find somewhere you can afford. But the market is terrible right now. I'll lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. Welcome to the real world, where sometimes people lose money on investments. Catherine was shaking her head. This is insane. You want us to throw away our entire lives, everything we've worked for. What have you worked for? Richard interrupted. Name one thing you've accomplished that didn't involve my money. Catherine opened her mouth, then closed it again. You want us to become poor, Tyler said. You want us to suffer. I want you to become human beings. I want you to understand that your worth as people isn't determined by your net worth. I want you to learn that happiness doesn't come from having unlimited money to spend. And you think working at McDonald's is going to teach us that? Marcus asked sarcastically. I think working anywhere, earning your own money, paying your own bills, and interacting with people who don't know or care who your father is will teach you that. Richard stood up again. You have 24 hours to decide. Accept my terms, and you have a chance to earn back your inheritance. Refuse, and you're on your own permanently. What if we just wait you out? Catherine asked. What if we refuse to play your games and just wait for you to die? Richard's expression hardened. Then you'll be waiting a very long time with no money, because if you refuse this opportunity, I'll donate every penny to charity. You won't get a cent. You wouldn't do that, Marcus said, but his voice lacked confidence. Wouldn't I? I just faked my own bankruptcy to test your character. Do you really want to bet that I'm bluffing about this? Tyler was crying now, real tears of fear and desperation. "Dad, please, there has to be another way. Can't we just promise to be better? Can't we just say we're sorry?" "Sorry for what?" For not caring about you during your fake crisis, for being selfish, for taking your money for granted." Richard felt his heart soften slightly. Tyler at least seemed to understand what he'd done wrong. "Saying you're sorry is easy, Tyler. Changing who you are is hard. If you really want to be different, you'll accept my challenge." "And if we can't do it," Catherine asked, "if we try and fail, then you'll have learned something important about yourselves, and you'll still be better people than you are right now." Richard picked up his keys and headed for the door. 24 hours. Call James Morrison with your decisions." "Dad, wait," Marcus called. "What if we only do it for 2 years instead of 5? Or 3 years?" Richard stopped at the door. 5 years or nothing. Those are the only options. "But why 5 years? Why not less?" "Because it took you 35 years to become the kind of person who threatens to sue his own father. I figure it might take 5 years to undo that damage." He left them sitting in the conference room, staring at the financial documents that proved their father was still one of the richest men in America, but that they were about to become 3 of the poorest. Outside in the parking lot, Richard sat in his car for a moment before starting the engine. He felt no satisfaction in what he'd just done, no joy in seeing his children's shocked faces or their growing desperation. But he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, his children could become people he could actually be proud of. People who understood that character mattered more than cash, that relationships were more valuable than real estate, that love couldn't be bought but had to be earned. The next 24 hours would tell him whether his children thought their father's love was worth 5 years of hard work, or whether they'd rather be rich orphans than humble children. Either way, Richard finally knew who he was dealing with, and for the first time in years, he was prepared to live with the consequences of his choices. Just as his children would have to live with theirs. The phone calls came exactly 24 hours later. Marcus called first at 2:01 p.m. "Dad, I've thought about your offer," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "And I have a counter-proposal." Richard was sitting in his study, looking out at the garden where his children used to play when they were young, back when they laughed together and fought over who got to help him plant flowers. "I'm listening. Instead of 5 years at minimum wage, what if I work for 1 year at a regular job, and then you give me a position in one of your companies? I could learn the business from the ground up, prove myself as an executive." "That's not the deal, Marcus." "Dad, be reasonable. I have an MBA from Harvard. I have connections in the business world. Making me flip burgers for 5 years is just wasting my potential." "Your potential for what?" "For being successful, for building something meaningful, for contributing to society." Richard almost laughed. "Marcus, in 35 years, what have you contributed to society?" I've invested in startups. I've supported local businesses. With my money. Money that you gave me to invest. Money that I gave you to live on while you figured out what kind of person you wanted to become. Apparently, you decided to become someone who threatens to sue his father." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Dad, I'm sorry about that. I was upset. I wasn't thinking clearly." "You were thinking very clearly. You were thinking about getting your hands on money that you felt entitled to. I apologize for that. But this 5-year plan is insane. You're asking me to throw away my education, my connections, my entire adult life. I'm asking you to build a new adult life based on your own efforts instead of my bank account. And if I refuse, then you're choosing your pride over your family. You're choosing the easy path over the right path." Marcus was quiet for a long time. "I can't do it, Dad. I can't work minimum wage jobs for 5 years. I have too much to lose." "What do you have to lose?" "My reputation, my social status, my business contacts. Dad, if people find out I'm working at a grocery store or something, I'll be a laughingstock. No one will ever take me seriously again. Maybe the kind of people who would laugh at honest work aren't the kind of people whose opinions matter." "Easy for you to say. You're still rich. You don't have to worry about what people think." Richard felt a deep sadness settle in his chest. "Marcus, I'm giving you a chance to become someone I can respect, someone you can respect. Why is that not worth 5 years of your life?" "Because I don't need to prove anything to anyone. I know who I am." "Do you?" "Because the person I've seen over the past month isn't someone I recognize as my son." "Then maybe you don't know me as well as you think you do." "Maybe I don't." Marcus hung up without saying goodbye. Catherine called 30 minutes later. "Daddy, I've been crying for 24 hours straight," she said, her voice thick with tears. "Brad thinks your plan is completely unfair. What does Brad think I should do instead? He thinks you should just give us a smaller inheritance and let us prove ourselves with real opportunities, not this humiliation." "Humiliation?" "Yes. You want me to work retail or food service. Do you know what that would do to my reputation? My friends would never speak to me again." "Catherine, if your friends would abandon you for working an honest job, what does that tell you about your friends?" "It tells me that they have standards, that they expect people in our social circle to maintain certain dignity." Richard closed his eyes. His daughter thought dignity came from avoiding work, not from doing it well. "What if I said 2 years instead of 5? She asked hopefully. "I could do 2 years. 5 years, Catherine. Not 4, not 3, not 2, 5. "But why 5? What's magical about 5 years?" "Because it takes time to change who you are at your core. It takes time to learn empathy and humility and work ethic. You can't fake those things for a few months and then go back to your old life." "What if I volunteer instead? What if I work for charity organizations? That's still helping people, but it's more appropriate for someone of my background." "Volunteer work doesn't pay the bills. I want you to understand what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck." "But I've never lived paycheck to paycheck. I don't know how to budget or shop for groceries or any of that." "Then you'll learn, the same way millions of other people learn." Catherine was crying harder now. "Daddy, please, there has to be another way. I love you. I want to be in your life, but I can't do this. I can't throw away everything I've built." "What have you built, Catherine? Your social status came from my money. Your lifestyle came from my credit cards. Your reputation came from being my daughter. What have you actually built yourself?" She couldn't answer. "I can't do it," she finally whispered. "I'm sorry, but I can't." "Then you're choosing to walk away from our family?" "No, you're choosing to destroy our family with impossible demands. I'm choosing to offer you a path back to being someone I can be proud of. You're choosing not to take it." "I hope you're happy," she said bitterly. "I hope this sick test was worth losing your daughter." She hung up. Tyler called last, just before 5 p.m. "Dad, I need more time to think about this," he said. "You've had 24 hours. "I know, but this is the biggest decision of my life. Can't I have just a little more time?" "What would more time change, Tyler? Maybe I could find a compromise. Maybe I could find a way to do what you want without completely destroying my life." "How would working an honest job destroy your life?" "Because I'm not equipped for it. Dad, I've never had a real job. I don't know how to wake up at 6 a.m. and work all day and come home exhausted. I don't know how to live on $20,000 a year instead of $200,000. "Then you'll learn." "But what if I can't? What if I try and I'm terrible at it? What if I get fired from every job I try?" Richard heard something in Tyler's voice that he hadn't heard from Marcus or Catherine. Genuine fear mixed with genuine desire to try. "Then you'll try again. You'll get another job and learn from your mistakes. And you'll still consider putting me back in the will. If you complete the 5 years and I can see that you've genuinely changed, yes." Tyler was quiet for a long time. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you really think I can do this? Do you think I'm capable of changing?" The question broke Richard's heart. For the first time in the conversation, Tyler sounded like a scared child instead of an entitled adult. "I think you're capable of becoming anyone you choose to become, but you have to choose it." "What if I choose it and fail anyway?" "Then you'll fail trying to become a better person instead of succeeding at being a worse one." Tyler laughed, but it was shaky. "When you put it like that, what's your decision, son?" "I'll do it. I'll try." Richard felt tears spring to his eyes. "Are you sure?" "No, I'm terrified. But I'm more terrified of losing you forever." "You won't lose me, Tyler. No matter what happens, you're still my son. Even if I fail at this, even if you fail, but I don't think you will." 2 years later, Richard stood in the parking lot of a Target store in Glendale, watching through the window as Tyler helped an elderly customer load heavy bags into her car. His youngest son was wearing a red polo shirt and khaki pants. His hair was shorter, and his face was tanned from working in the sun. Tyler looked happy. Richard had been secretly visiting the store for months, watching Tyler work. He'd seen his son get yelled at by angry customers and stay polite. He'd seen him work overtime when co-workers called in sick. He'd seen him save money from his paycheck to help a fellow employee whose car had broken down. Tyler had moved into a small studio apartment in a working-class neighborhood. He rode the bus to work. He shopped with coupons and ate meals he cooked himself. And somehow, he seemed more at peace than he'd ever been in his mansion with unlimited money. Tyler finished helping the customer and started collecting shopping carts from the parking lot. He moved with purpose and dignity, treating the simple work like it mattered. Richard walked into the store. "Dad?" Tyler looked shocked to see him. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see how you're doing." Tyler smiled, and Richard realized it was the first genuine smile he'd seen from his son in years. "I'm doing good, really good." "You look happy." "I am happy. I know that sounds crazy, but I am." They walked to the employee break room, where Tyler introduced Richard to his co-workers. They talked about Tyler like he was family, sharing stories about his kindness and work ethic. These people cared about Tyler for who he was, not who his father was. "Dad, I want to show you something," Tyler said, pulling out his phone. "I've been taking night classes at the community college, business management." "That's wonderful. I'm paying for them myself. It's taking forever because I can only afford one class at a time, but I'm learning so much. Not just about business, but about what it's like to work for an education instead of just buying one." Richard felt prouder of Tyler than he'd ever felt before. "I also want you to meet someone," Tyler said shyly. "Her name is Maria. She works in the deli section. We've been dating for 6 months. I'd love to meet her." Tyler introduced him to Maria, a young woman with calloused hands and a warm smile who clearly adored Tyler. She talked about him like he was a hero, not because he was rich, but because he was kind. "Your son is special," she told Richard. "He's the hardest worker here, and he always helps everyone else. He's not like other guys I've dated." After work, Tyler invited Richard to his apartment. It was tiny and furnished with second-hand furniture, but it was clean and organized and felt like a real home. "I know it's not much," Tyler said. "It's perfect," Richard replied, and meant it. They sat at Tyler's small kitchen table, drinking coffee from mismatched mugs. "Dad, I need to tell you something," Tyler said. "Even if you never put me back in your will, even if I never see a penny of inheritance, this was the best thing you ever did for me." "Why?" "Because for the first time in my life, I like who I am. I'm proud of myself, not because of what I have, but because of what I do, because of how I treat people, because of who I've become." Richard felt tears running down his cheeks. "I'm proud of you too, really. More proud than I've ever been of anything." Tyler reached across the table and took his father's hand. "I love you, Dad. Not because you're rich, but because you cared enough about me to make me become a better person." 6 months later, Richard updated his will. Tyler was back in it, but with conditions. He would inherit only if he continued to work and live modestly, using any inheritance to help others rather than returning to a life of luxury. Marcus and Catherine never called again. They'd made their choice, choosing their pride over their father's love. Richard heard through mutual friends that Marcus had eventually found investors for a new business venture, funded by his wife's family money. Catherine had convinced Brad to support her lifestyle, though their marriage was reportedly struggling under the financial pressure. But Tyler had found something worth more than money. He'd found himself. On Richard's 70th birthday, Tyler threw him a party at the community center near his apartment. The guests were Tyler's co-workers, his neighbors, his classmates from community college. They brought homemade food and heartfelt gifts they'd made themselves. It was the best birthday party Richard had ever had. As he looked around the room at these people who had so little money but so much heart, Richard realized he'd learned something too. He'd learned that the best inheritance he could give his son wasn't money. It was the chance to discover that he didn't need it. The end? A story about love tough enough to demand growth, about the courage to choose character over comfort, and about discovering that the most valuable things in life can't be bought with money. Because sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give a child is the opportunity to find out who they really are when everything else is stripped away.